Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Hammer Horror in Order here on the All American Spook Show YouTube channel. I'm Josh, and I'm joined here with Donnie
Yo.
and the Professor Smoke.
What's up?
And the entire purpose of Hammer Horror in Order is literally the definition is right there. We're going through and we're watching all the classic Hammer Horror and thriller movies in the order in which they were released. So far in this series, we have watched The Quatermass Experiment, aka The Creeping Unknown from 1955, X the Unknown from 1956, The Curse of Frankenstein from 1957, and literally released almost right around the exact same time as the one that we're here to talk about today, Quatermass 2, aka Enemy from Space, released, actually premiered May 24th, 1957 in London, but it was actually released June 17th, 1957 there in the UK, and then it wasn't released here in the United States until sometime in the month of September of 1957. So this one played almost exactly around the same time as The Curse of Frankenstein, and I think that kind of casts a little bit of a shadow on this one as far as, like, just comparing Hammer movies to other Hammer movies, because Curse of Frankenstein came out and was doing gangbusters, really kicking some ass, and this one did well, but not as well as that one. So that really kind of led Hammer to make that shift from the sci-fi thriller horror type stuff, right, Smoke, to the more gothic horror that they became known for years later.
Yeah, it was significantly more popular than the Quatermass 2 film that came out, which Quatermass 2 was well enough. It did well. The first one did really well, but Curse of Frankenstein just came along and blew all of it out the water. And yeah, they just decided to go down the gothic path, which was a good decision.
Yeah.
Then we got all kind of sequels and all sorts of, it basically go through the whole pantheon of classic horror characters that, Wolfman, we'll be getting to Dracula, we'll be getting to the Mummy, all that good stuff.
Yeah, matter of fact, they didn't get back to the Quatermass series, making another one of these until a decade later, 1967.
Yeah, 1967, right?
Yeah. Quatermass in the Pit, aka 5 Million Years to Earth. That was a full decade later, and not with the same group of folks involved. This one, like I said earlier, was also titled Enemy from Space here in the U.S., but in Australia, there was another title called Birth of a Monster. So I thought that was an interesting alternate title. Another interesting thing about this movie is that it is considered the first film sequel to use the number 2 or the II suffix in the title. So I don't believe that I could find this had ever happened before in any movie that was, like, say, a direct sequel that they actually had the number 2 in the title. So that was interesting.
And then going further from that, it's the only Hammer sequel that had the number 2 in it until you get to the more current stuff. I think it was all the way up to, like, Woman in Black too. Was the next time that Hammer used a numeral for a sequel. They did plenty of sequels, but none of them had a numeric, had a number in it.
Yeah, it would always be like Frankenstein or The Curse of Frankenstein or Son of or Revenge of or something like that. It would always be some title like that. And that was really kind of commonplace throughout all kinds of movies, I think, back then. They didn't really, that wasn't probably until what, the 70s or so, where they started saying, like, all right, here's movie number 1, movie number 2, movie number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
And it's a very generic thing when you think about it. I mean, but it became huge. It became big in the 70s and then huge in the 80s for everybody just to be, part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
This movie was directed by Val Guest, who also directed Quatermass Experiment, and then the next movie that we'll be talking about in the series, The Abominable Snowman. He also worked on The Day the Earth Caught Fire. Unfortunately, he passed May 10th of 2006 at the age of 94. The story and the screenplay were Val Guest had a hand in that, but it was mostly based on the work of Nigel Neal, who I believe was the original writer on the serial that this whole Quatermass thing is based on. He also worked on Quatermass Experiment. Once again, the movie we'll do next, The Abominable Snowman. An interesting one that I found about Nigel Neal was that he was the man that actually originally wrote Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. But apparently he had his name removed after the director, Tommy Lee Wallace, came in and made a lot of changes to his script. So he had his name removed. But, like, if you look on IMDb, he has an uncredited writing role for Season of the Witch. So there's your connecting Michael Myers to Quatermass connection of the
And
week.
then also Nigel Neal, who obviously does not like anything, doesn't like attaching his name to anything he didn't necessarily do. Because as we talked about next, The Unknown, which was supposed to be a Quatermass film,
Yeah.
Nigel Neal didn't write it; somebody else did, so he didn't allow them to use the Quatermass names for the characters and everything.
The movie stars Brian Donlevy reprising the role as Quatermass. He was once again in Quatermass Experiment. He was not next The Unknown because, like we just said, that was a different, basically the same but different named character in that one. But he was also went on to be in The Curse of the Fly. He was in Gamera, The Invincible.
So there was actually something when Quatermass was he was being questioned about I forget the character's name, but the guy asked him, what did the sore or like what did the wound look like? He was like, yeah, it was kind of reddish. Well, obviously, it's a black and white movie. It was released in black and white, but it was shot in color. It was shot in color, but released in black and white, and the color negative still exists.
Yeah, I mean, but as far as this movie is concerned, I mean, like there were certain aspects of it, like I'm going to directly compare it to the Quatermass Experiment, because I think that's fair. I mean, you've got got Brian Donlevy. I mean, the same basically group of people here doing this 2 years later, so I think it's fair to compare. There were certain aspects of this where, for some reason, for me, this is just my opinion, it held my attention a little bit more. I think maybe it was because of that. There was like a kind of a mystery going on here in this one that you didn't have in that first one, and to an extent, like there's a better story, I think.
Yeah.
Afoot here, like you're trying to figure out, like, all right, what happened to this town? Why is this going on? Who are these people? These mystery like soldiers or whatever. They called them zombies.
Yeah.
What's going on? Is this alien? Whatever. I mean, you figure that much. You put two and two together. They never, and that's the thing. They, once again, we don't go into spoiler territory here. They never really fully explain exactly what the hell this was, but you get kind of there, right? You put it enough together to figure out what it is. But Smoke, what did you think of it? Like as far as like how they played this one compared to Quatermass Experiment and all that?
Currently, the first one kind of edges out the second one just barely for me. And I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it. Like you said, I know there is a little bit more plot going on in the second one than there was in the first one.
I think overall this one, just for me, it held my attention a little bit more. You really like more for me. I was more on the edge of my seat to figure out what was going on. Plus, two, I think there's you stop short of saying there's a little bit more of a payoff with the monster in this one because it's fairly similar, isn't it? Like to a point where,
amorphous blob.
yeah. To a point where I was almost like, wait a minute, they're going to connect this to the first movie somehow. Like they never did, but I almost thought for a second there they were going to go there. Like, oh, wait a minute, this ties to what happened in that first one, but it doesn't. But the final monster, the movies of that time period, we've talked about this in the first couple episodes, that atomic age. The monsters were always kind of weak, in my opinion. In these movies,
yeah,
always some blob or it's some guy in a suit, they're just kind of, especially looking back on it now, it looks really weak, but even of the time, I would kind of be like,
yeah,
some like you said, amorphous blob, I don't know.
There's one, and I know we kind of don't want to get into spoilers, but if you're watching this, you've likely already seen the
there's
movie.
A chance,
yeah. There's a shot at the end where the three monsters are like right around the building, and it reminds. And I didn't think about it until watching it. Reminds me of that awful movie we watched, Black Friday, where at the end at the end of that movie, which if you've seen it, I might as well spoil it for you. But
it's a spoiler, but it's not. There's a big monster.
Yeah, it's a big monster.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
you'll watch it.
It's very similar in kind of look and I guess maybe shot placement.
I didn't make that connection whatsoever until now, so thanks. I just came down a full half of star on my retina. You're right.
I'd actually, thanks to Donnie, I'd actually managed to put that movie out of mind until now.
I forgot we watched it.
I was like, holy shit, there it is.
Black Friday.
Fuck.
I didn't think I'd get that comparison, but it's fair. It's fair. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, this is just a better movie through and through. So
yeah. All right, so yeah, anyways, that's our thoughts on it. And like I said, one of these days we'll take a deeper dive. I always look forward to watching these. I think it's a cool the whole concept is a cool series. So and plus if nothing else, it gives us a reason to go through and watch all the Hammer movies, so it might take us a lot longer to get to them on the podcast. So if nothing else, it's a way for us to get to them. The consensus rating that we talked about beforehand, before the show, and that we'll give you now, is we came up with 2 3/4 hammers is our rating for this one. And just once again, to directly compare to Quatermass Experiment, we gave that one 2.5. So as a group, we kind of came together and decided this one edged that one out just a little bit, but you're really splitting hairs here. I mean, they're, if you're being very honest, like they're very similar in a lot of ways. Even with Brian Donlevy and, like I said, a lot of behind the scenes people being the same, it really does feel like a good continuation, although not directly of that story, right? But it does feel like a natural progression of these are these characters in this setting, and now in this setting, and this makes sense what they're doing. So,
one thing we didn't mention: Brian Donlevy is the only one to reprise the role for more than one movie.
Yeah,
the role of Quatermass.
Yeah, and I don't think now, as far as he is concerned, my opinion, he's not quite as good in this one as he was the first one, but he still does a good job, as holding it down as Quatermass. So I got no big complaints there. So, all right, so there we go. So next time around on Hammer Horror in Order, episode number 5 in the series, we'll be watching The Abominable Snowman, aka The Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas, which was released in 1957. So, really, I'll be honest with you, it's onward and upward from there. I mean, not that, I'm going to skip over The Abominable Snowman to get to what's coming, but we got some big ones coming up after that. So, start whetting your appetite now for some classic Hammer horror coming at you in the months ahead. So, I guess that'll pretty much put a big bow on Hammer horror for this month. So, this is a monthly series. So, come back this time next month. We'll give you that one. And don't forget to watch Spook Show Rewinds here on the YouTube channel and Grindhouse Gutter. And we put up full podcast episodes. And we encourage you to go check out aaspookshow.com. That's the center of the Spook Show universe. We'll direct you in all the little paths and tombs and layers that you need to go to check out everything that we do. So for Will, who couldn't be with us, Donnie, Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are from the All American Spook Show podcast. And we'll talk to you next month.